On today's episode, we are going to be breaking down the Buffalo Sabres 2024 NHL Draft Haul as well as their overall prospect pool.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week. Well, 3 days a week now that we're in off-season mode, and Monday through Friday, typically. But again, off-season mode. So this week, you're going to get 2 episodes from us, and we should be back to 3 or 4 next week. But today, it is a solo episode, as you can probably tell that I am monologuing here. But we are going to be looking into the Buffalo Sabres and breaking down who they got at the 2024 draft in Las Vegas, what their prospect pool consists of. We're going to give grades both to the draft class and the overall prospect pool. And we're going to shift our lens a little bit in looking ahead as well with some 2024-25 season projections and hopes and some point projections as well for the young stars of the Buffalo Sabres. But before we jump right into the episode today, today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So the Buffalo Sabres are a very interesting team in the NHL, and they've been building a really intriguing core over the past couple seasons. They've been drafting high-end players. They've been developing their own players very, very well. We've seen tremendous success with guys like Tage Thompson, for instance, and how they've been able to progress. Of course, he is a unicorn, both in how he plays and how he developed. But clearly the Buffalo Sabres have a direction with this team. But this past season was rather disappointing, and they ended up with yet another top 12 selection at the NHL draft. They traded down in the end from 11 to 14, where they ended up nabbing Konsta Helenius, the first of the 2024 draftees that we're going to look at here. And this is a player that I think was very good value at 14th overall. He may lack the top line upside that a lot of the other dynamic players in the top 10, top 15 range of this draft had. But that said, he is one of the most polished and refined players that you could have hoped to get in this draft class. Not dissimilar to Zach Benson the year prior, who they took at 13th overall in 2023. Helenius is a mature two-way centerman. He's as good off the puck as he is on it. His movement in the defensive zone to really keep a tight gap, to apply pressure, to lock down the biggest passing lanes is really, really strong. He has an active stick. He's very purposeful with what he does, and he's very cerebral. He doesn't do things for the sake of doing them. There's always a real process behind what he does and why. And in the offensive zone, he's a tremendous distributor and facilitator for his teammates. He makes the lives of his line mates a lot easier offensively. He gets the dangerous areas. He's able to be a decent enough puck retriever. He's a really decent playmaker. He's a good enough shot. He's a scoring threat based off of his strong off-puck movement and finding dangerous space in the offensive zone. And overall, while he's not going to be a point-a-game NHLer at his peak, we are looking at a player that could be an exceptional second-line centerman, even on a team with the center depth of the Buffalo Sabres. He's refined, he's intelligent, and he's going to be an NHLer in not very long at all. Give him maybe 2 years, maybe even just a single year of extra development, and I think that you have a really good NHL player here. While I think that there were some other high upside bets still left on the table here at 14th overall, Konsta Helenius was one of the best players available, and probably as of right now, he was the best player left available in that draft slot. So I think the Buffalo Sabres are deservedly elated with having nabbed him here at 14th overall. With their second round draft pick, which they got from the San Jose Sharks, in terms of moving down in that first round from 11 to 14, they used that selection on a player I really, really like, and that's Adam Kleber, a hulking 6'6", 214-pound right shot defenseman who was playing for the Lincoln Stars in the USHL this past season. He's not an offensive dynamo. He scored 26 points in 56 games and just 5 goals in that span, but he is a really, really good defenseman. His defensive impact is one of the stronger ones among the USHL class of blue liners in this past draft. He uses his strength and his range and his mobility in tandem to really, really make life difficult for players that are trying to attack down his side of the ice. He's able to keep a pretty tight gap. He uses all of his tools and layers them together to really, really just take that space and time away from the players that, especially at the USHL level, kind of have come to expect that time and space to execute plays. And Kleber was not one of the defensemen that really afforded that to his competition. I think there's a bunch of growing room with this player. Of course, the physique is already massive. Add in the mobility, add in the decent gap habits in terms of his rush defending, and even on the puck, he makes a really good first pass. He's not going to wow you with a big dangle or make any big dynamic play on puck, but he makes smart decisions very consistently, and that includes making smart passes in the breakout and also holding on to the puck when he can. He's not a player that needs to get the puck off of his stick as soon as he gets it on, which is always a nice thing to see in the modern day of the NHL, of players that are able to handle pressure and make intelligent decisions under it. So I think Kleber is an excellent project to take on. He diverges from any other prospect in their blue line prospect pool, which I really like as well. And as a big right shot, I think that there is an NHL future for this player. And I think it was really good value at 42nd overall. He's a player that I had been thinking for quite a while was deserving of a top 50 selection on draft day. So I'm quite happy for him that he succeeded in that. The next player they picked is another guy I like a lot, and that's Brody Zemer, the captain of the US NTDP this past season. Zemer is an intense and intelligent and very, very, very effective right winger. He's 5'11", 196 pounds. Not the biggest frame in the world, but he is rock solid on his skates. He wins puck battles. He never gives up on plays. He has a very high motor. He's a heavy shooter. He's a fantastic leader on the ice. There is no question in the NTDP who the leader was this past season. It was Brody Zemer, and he's also a really good defensive player. He's able to lead by example and verbally and vocally as well. And the results were also fantastic this past year. In 61 games for the program in all competitions, he scored 27 goals and 70 points and only logged 16 penalty minutes despite playing a really high-intensity style of hockey while being effective at both ends of the ice. This is a player that I think deserved to go higher in the draft than where he went. I really believed he was a second-round talent through and through, and to nab him in the third round at 71st overall is fantastic value. While he may not be a top six dynamo long-term, this is a player that's going to fill into that bottom six and bring so much value to the table, whether it be defensively, whether it be the ability to score important goals in big games, get to the dangerous areas offensively, do a lot of that dirty work, while also bringing a lot of leadership and a lot of lead by example paired with that vocal leadership and being able to command his teammates around on the ice and tell them where to go and what to do. Zemer is a player that I think Buffalo fans are going to adore when he makes the jump to the NHL. He's going to be developing in the NCAA for the next couple seasons. He's a commit for the University of Minnesota, which is a strong development program. And I have a lot of hope for this player. I think he's going to be a really likable bottom six piece when he's on your team. Not so likable if you're playing against him. And I think that in the third round, there were a few better selections than Brody Zemer. The next player they picked is yet another player I like a lot. The Buffalo Sabres have a tendency of drafting players that I also have a real appreciation for, and Luke Osborne in the fourth round was excellent value too. This is a 6'1", 172-pound left shot defenseman who was playing for the Youngstown Phantoms this past season as one of the youngest players eligible for the 2024 draft class. He's born just 6 days before the cutoff for the 2025 class, and his development over the course of the past year has been fantastic. In 60 games with Youngstown, he scored 8 goals, 15 assists for 23 points. Doesn't jump off the page, but he started that season not even really being expected to crack the lineup for Youngstown, and he finished the year playing top pairing minutes with Andrew Strathman. This was a player who really grew leaps and bounds, and everything in his toolkit goes around his intelligence. He's highly, highly calculated. He reads the game like few other players in the USHL could last season, despite being one of the younger draft eligibles in that league this past year. So Osborne's a player who's able to carry the puck up well. He makes sound decisions with the puck on his stick. He keeps a tight gap. He's decently mobile. I could still like to see some more progression on that front, considering that he's not the biggest blue liner in the world. But overall, this is a player that I think has real upside as a number 4 defenseman long-term in the NHL. And to get a player with that type of potential in the 4th round is just great value. So I think Buffalo fans should really be curious about this player. I think he's going to keep progressing really nicely and is a nice little hidden gem in this draft class. Now, the final 3 players selected here, 4 players, we can actually do a bit more of a quick fire round. In the 4th round still, at 123rd overall, Buffalo selected Simon-Pierre Brunet from the Drummondville Voltigeurs in the QMJHL. This is a 6'2", 196 right shot defenseman who's a decent enough skater, plays the game quite in a straightforward fashion, especially as a QMJHL defender, not trying to do too much, but he really forces attackers to try to get through him, but they struggle to. He's really solid on his skates and is really able to shepherd play to the perimeter, especially against that QMJHL competition. Not the biggest offensive producer in the world. He logged 14 points in 52 games this past season, but an interesting project nonetheless there on the blue line. Next, they picked a left shot defenseman from the university, Michigan State University in the NCAA, and that's Patrick Geary, a 6'1", 185-pound left shot D who scored 13 points in 35 games as an NCAA freshman this past year. He was developing with the Waterloo Blackhawks previous to that, and he's never been a big offensive producer. He never even cracked 18 points at the USHL level, but this is a guy who plays very intelligently. He is able to use his strong anticipation for the game and reading of play to just get in the way and he has a very active stick, uses his stick to really disincentivize players from accessing the middle of the ice and getting pucks through the middle lane into the slot. So a player that I think is quite interesting. He plays quite physically often. He's not afraid of getting involved and using his body to separate opponent from puck. But this is a real defensive specialist. And if he makes his jump to the NHL, expected to be in a defensive capacity on a bottom pairing. Next, they went with a forward, and that is Vasily Zelenov from the Alps Hockey League in Austria. This is a dual citizen for Austria and Russia, but he's been developing in Austria for as long as his elite prospects profile goes back in time. And he played last season with the RB Hockey Juniors in Alps Hockey League, where he scored 14 goals and 37 points in 40 games. He is an 18-year-old, so drafted in his draft year. And for a 7th-round selection, I think that this is a decent enough value. You're taking a big swing on a player playing in a league that isn't overly scouted, put up good results, and overall has a decent enough offensive toolkit. So we'll see how he continues to progress there in Austria. But the last player drafted by the Buffalo Sabres is one that I really do still want to focus on, and that is Ryerson Leenders from the Mississauga Steelheads, now the Brampton Steelheads in the OHL. This is a 6'2", 179-pound goaltender, maybe even a bit smaller than 6'2". I've seen him listed anywhere between 6 feet and 6'2", and on the ice he does look a little bit smaller. But he's a very young goaltender for the draft class, as a June 1st, 06 birthday, and he was really, really good for Mississauga this season. He put up a .909 save percentage in the regular season while splitting the crease with Jack Ivankovic there in Mississauga, but he played in 46 games this season, did Leenders. And he is a really intelligent, positionally sound goaltender. He blocks off his post really well. He tracks pucks very, very well. And overall, he's calm, he's composed, he's intelligent. He's able to get eyes on the puck. One thing that has come up, obviously, is that he's a little bit smaller than the average goaltender, and he can't look over the biggest forwards that he plays against. So there are definitely moments where he fails to even see a puck that other goaltenders probably would, and therefore struggles to stop them. But overall, I think in terms of taking a swing on an undersized goaltender in the late rounds, especially, this is fantastic value. I would have drafted Leenders in the third, fourth round. And I think getting him the seventh is just great business for the Buffalo Sabres. And yet another interesting goaltender there in the prospect pool for Buffalo. But that wraps up this first segment here for us here at Locked On NHL Prospects. And we'll jump straight into the overall prospect pool breakdown in the following segment. If you want last-minute tickets, Game Time is the place to be. With Game Time, you can get awesome last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% on whatever event you are interested in attending, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, whatever it is that you are interested in, Game Time has you covered. Game Time also offers awesome zone deals where you pick the zone or the section and Game Time selects the seat for you for added potential savings, especially if you have a really tight schedule and something opens up for you last minute where you have some time to go out and do something fun, to treat yourself to an event. Game Time is exactly what you need. Game Time also gives you a lowest price guarantee. If you find a better price than what is listed on Game Time, just have to show that receipt to Game Time and you will get 110% of the difference in order to go with Game Time to your event. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, let's just break down the overall prospect pool for the Sabres then, and we're going to go position by position here, starting with the forwards, moving on to the defenders, finishing off goaltenders, and then we're going to look at a little bit of what the areas of need still are in this prospect pool, and we're going to cap it off by grading the prospect pool. Speaking of grading, I completely forgot to grade the overall draft class, so I'm going to do that first here. I think overall the 2024 class was a very strong one for the Sabres, and I'd give it an A- grade. They got really good value in just about every draft slot where they picked, and I think they did extremely well. Maybe they could have gotten a higher upside player there in the first round if they hadn't traded down for Konsta Helenius there at 14, but they were able to get Adam Kleber with that selection, so I really cannot fault it. So really good draft class, A- grade, but the overall prospect pool is an interesting one to break down because a lot of these players have already graduated. So the overall grade is going to be a little bit weaker than it was for the draft class specifically because a lot of the young stars for the Buffalo Sabres have already made that leap, whether it be Owen Power or Zach Benson, JJ Peterka, the list goes on and on and on of young players that have already established themselves as consistent NHL pieces. But let's start off here with the forwards, and in no real particular order, we're going to start off here with Noah Östlund, a really intelligent two-way centerman who's making his transition over to North America this season. I'm very excited to see him in that AHL system that they have going on. He's a player that I've had a lot of appreciation for going back to when he was drafted. I think I ranked him about 7th overall in that year, and a lot of that came down to how he was able to blend high-end skill and creativity with high-end intelligence. He's not the most physical player in the world, and that's still an aspect that he could probably work on a bit further to facilitate his jump to the NHL, but a player who's able to create from very much nothing and is able to also make a difference even when the skill isn't ending up with pucks in the net. He's an effective defensive piece. He's important in transition. He's a really good puck carrier. He's a creator. He's a distributor. He plays a lot of different roles, and he's very adaptable. I'd love to see him in the top 6 for the Buffalo Sabres in a year or two's time. I think he has that potential. He has that upside. He has the skill and the intelligence to do so, but we're going to see how his development progresses in this upcoming season. Konsta Helenius, we already talked about, but very good prospect to add into the cupboard. Yuri Kulik, another player who is able to combine high-end defensive potential with a really good offensive toolkit. For him, it's the one-timer, it's the finishing ability. He's physical, he's strong, he's able to get himself to the net front, and he does not shy away from physical confrontation or initiating contact. He's a player who plays a very direct style and is made for the modern NHL game in just about every way. He's going to be a middle six center long term for Buffalo, and I think that he's going to establish himself as a key piece in the NHL lineup this season. His development in the AHL has been going great, but I don't think there's too much left for him to learn there. But Anton Wahlberg is a different story. He still has a lot of development. He was drafted a year ago in the second round. Very raw player, but fantastic physical tools, whether it be the strength, the power, the mobility, the shooting ability, the flashes of really dynamic playmaking, the handling. There's so much to like in this player, and he was one of my favorites as well in that 2023 draft class, and great value selection for him. He's progressed really well since he was picked as well, but he's going to need another 2-3 years before he can make an impact in an NHL lineup. Victor Nukshev is another guy I liked a lot as well. He's really flashy, really skilled. He's deceptive. He's creative. He likes to do things actively with the puck on his stick. He likes to create things in the offensive zone. And while there are definitely still some rough edges with this game, and he makes some mistakes that come back to bite his team, he very much is a player I think will be a net positive once he makes that leap to the NHL. He just transferred over to the AHL a year ago. I think he could still use another year, 2 years to develop there in the AHL. But he's a player I think could be a really fun depth skill guy playing in your middle six, but creating and being able to chip in on the power play as well. And very, very fun player. Similar thing can be said as well for about Ishak Rusian. The 2021 first round selection is a guy who's been kind of in the background and progressing steadily. He's really developed his shot significantly since being drafted. He can snipe the puck now. And he's a player who plays with speed as well and skill, while also bringing a level of defensive, intelligence and awareness. The overall defensive output could still use a little bit of work, but he has a good understanding of where to be and what to do in his own zone against professional competition. Lastly, we already talked about him as well, but Brody Ziemer deserves a shout out here among the forward prospects. But moving on to the defensive core, and this is where things get a bit weaker on the prospect side of things, because so many of the young defensemen have already made the leap to the NHL, whether it be Dahlin or Power or whoever, right? You have a lot of young pieces there on the blue line that are in the NHL actively. But with the addition of Adam Kleber in the second round this year and Maxim Sturbach in the second round last season, you added two USHL right shot defensemen that play very different styles. Kleber is your big, shutdown, massive 6'6" mobile behemoth of a defenseman, while Sturbach is your 6'2", but mobile, highly mobile puck mover, who's been progressing nicely in the NCAA as well. Gavin McCarthy is another name that deserves a mention in this segment, as well do Luke Osborne and Nikita Novikov, who played a really good rookie season in the AHL last year as a 6'4" Russian defenseman. Curious to see how his development continues as well. Last but not least, we have the goaltenders. Topias Lainen has been developing quite nicely over in Finland for the Buffalo Sabres. I've really liked his overall athleticism. He's a really toolsy goaltender, and I think he's an interesting project that they took on. Same can be said about Scott Ratzlaff, who's been one of the best goaltenders in the CHL, let alone just in the WHL the past couple seasons. And now Ryerson Leenders as well. We have a great OHL goaltender. A lot of these goaltenders are technically refined and highly intelligent, and I think that they have a clear kind of type for their goaltenders, and a lot of that's kind of going in the Devin Levi mold, and I think that's a really, really nice approach. Now that you have a goaltender like Devin Levi in your system, you can kind of just learn from that and learn about the increase of value that Levy's seen since his draft when he was picked in the 7th round by the Florida Panthers. I think overall, this prospect pool could use another top 4 right shot defenseman. We'll see if either of Sturbach or or Adam Kleber can become that player. But I think adding one more, maybe a bit more of an offensive angle, could be interesting for the prospect pool. But again, you have all the young players already on the blue line in the NHL. But I also think adding one more dynamic top six forward to the prospect pool will be quite important. A lot of the players in Buffalo's system play relatively comparable styles, whether it be Konsta Helenius, Zach Benson, or Noah Östlund. You could even throw in Yuri Kulik into the mix. You have a lot of two-way forwards who like to play down the middle, who are really good facilitators in the offensive zone and have a specific piece of their toolkit that stands out, whether it be Kulik's shot or Zach Benson's playmaking or so on and so forth. But you don't really have a player in there that can be your go-to dynamo in the NHL long term. And I think adding one more prospect that projects as that kind of piece would go a really long way for this team. But overall, it is a strong prospect pool, a little bit weakened by the graduations, but I'd still give it a B, maybe even a B plus grade. You have a lot of talent in here, and there's a real clear ideology that formed this prospect pool coming to fruition. A lot of these players have comparable strengths in terms of the character, the work ethic, the defensive capabilities, on top of the offensive intelligence as well. So I really do like this prospect pool, but we're going to wrap up the show in the next segment where we're going to be breaking down the 2024-25 season projections, expectations, and hopes for the team as a whole, as well as for some specific young studs. But we'll get into that right after the break. We are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate that isn't to search at all. It is to match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global visitors every single month, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates incredibly quickly. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with your candidates even faster than typical. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employees agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And I can say from my own personal experience that that's very much the case for me. I've used Indeed for jobs in the past outside of the hockey world, and it's always been really helpful for me to have a lot of transparency in terms of having an understanding of what the expectations of a job are, as well as transparency around potential pay, wages, salary, and just having all that information right in front of me to know if it's going to be a good fit for me or not. And that's true as well from the employer's side, as well as it is from the employee's perspective. And the listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs even more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Alrighty, let's break down the 2024-25 season projections here to wrap up the show here, breaking down the Buffalo Sabres draft, their prospect pool, and now the road ahead. The 2023-24 season was quite disappointing for Buffalo. They wanted to win a lot more games than they did, and they lost a lot more games than the team with their level of skill probably should have. But it was a very young team, still getting into the swing of things, and the offseason program has been very clear for Buffalo. It has been adding experience, adding physicality, adding grit and sandpaper, whether it be going out and signing a quite gritty top six winger in Jason Zucker, or filling in the fourth line with high energy hitting guys like Nick Aubé-Kubel and Beck Malenstein, who they went out and acquired for a second round pick in Las Vegas at the draft. But I think that is a really intriguing direction for this team, because it was clear last year there's so much skill, but it just wasn't gluing together the way that they've been hoping for it to. And I think that adding players of these molds is really going to help that team come into its own. So I'm very curious to see how players are going to be playing in slightly more sheltered roles, perhaps, than they were last year. Zach Benson comes to mind specifically, who as an 18-year-old was kind of tasked to carry a middle six line for Buffalo and be like really the crux of like the dynamic output on that line. And he did quite well. I thought that he was a good rookie in the NHL last season, but Zach Benson's a player with tremendous potential, and that degree of offensive upside and the overall two-way implication wasn't quite like realized yet as a rookie, which should not have been the expectation as a 13th overall pick playing immediately after being drafted. But I think he's going to be able to take some steps and also perhaps find a bit more degree of comfort with hopefully consistent line mates while also being insulated and both on the physical side of things, but also in terms of those defensive responsibilities to hone his offensive craft a little bit more, which is what you want your young studs to be able to do as well. So I'm curious to see how that continues to progress for the Buffalo Sabres. And beyond that, I think that just allowing the young players to make mistakes and to learn is going to be crucial. Whether it be Devin Levy in goal, whether it be Zach Benson at forward, whether it be Bowen Byram as well on the blue line, a player who's only played 18 games as a Buffalo Sabres so far and showed off a lot of offensive upside and also a lot of defensive warts in that short span already. I think that allowing him to maybe find a degree of comfort on a second pairing is going to go a long way as well for his development. But to wrap up here the show, let's go through a list of some of the big young studs in this lineup, and Buffalo has more of them than the average team. So we're going to be looking at 7 players here, and basically I'm looking at players that are going to be roster players this upcoming season for Buffalo and are basically 2001, 2002, or later birthdays. So players that are like 22 and younger in general. Some 23-year-olds, I think, made the cut in here. But starting off here with Dylan Cousins, a player who took a bit of a step back offensively last season after signing his massive extension and playing a really, really good season in his contract year there. I think this season he's going to have a bounce back. I think he's a really intelligent player who knows how to make a difference in all 3 zones, and I could see him scoring 20 goals and 40 assists for 60 points next season if all goes well. Zach Benson, I think, could also kind of flirt with that 50-point mark, maybe score 20 goals, 30 assists to hit that. I'd love to see him playing second-line minutes significantly this year, but maybe starting off on the third line, find some more comfort and not be perhaps on display and with the big amount of pressure right out of the gate. But I think that Zach Benson's going to take a step in his development. That's one thing that he has done through his hockey career. Every single season, he makes significant steps in the right direction, and I do not think that this year is going to be an exception to that rule. I also think that Jack Quinn, hopefully with a fully healthy season this year, could score 25 goals, maybe 45 points with that, but maybe even 30 goals. It's well within the range of possibilities with his goal-scoring talent. When he's been healthy, he's been effective and productive at the NHL level as well already in his young career. JJ Peterka, I think, will continue to be a real spark plug for Buffalo, playing in that top 6. I don't know if he's going to flirt with the 30-goal mark again, but I do think he's going to get around the 25-goal mark this coming season, maybe 55 points as well. Alongside that, playing in those big top 6 minutes with the high-end skill that Buffalo does have in their system. Owen Power, I think, could score 15 goals and 45 points this season. He is going to take a step as an offensive piece. I'm quite confident. We saw high-end flashes from him last season where there were real stretches of games where he was the best defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres, well outshining Rasmus Dahlin. So I think that Power is going to keep progressing and hopefully also allow Bowen Byram kind of to chug along in the background a little bit over the course of this coming season. I could see Bowen Byram scoring 15 goals and 40 points while playing a second pairing, second power play type of role, and really just being able to play his game perhaps against slightly lesser competition as well, maybe limiting the defensive errors as well. But I think that he's going to have a good season in his first full year as a Sabre. And last but not least, we have Devin Levy. I think that you're going to see Levy get into at least 30 games this season, fingers crossed. We know that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has signed his big extension and is the likely number 1 this season, but I think that Levy is going to thrive in not being thrust into a role where he's expected to just take the mantle and be the starter out of the gate, and being able to just develop in a 1B or backup role this season. And I think he could get around a 908, 910 save percentage if all goes well as well. So yeah, I think that overall Buffalo has a fantastic young core, so many young players to be excited for. And yeah, I think that the 2024-25 season is not going to disappoint as the 2023-24 season did. Am I convinced they're going to be a playoff team immediately? Not really. The Atlantic Division is just an absolute war zone at the moment, and you have so many elite teams in that division, right? Like whether it be the Florida Panthers, who just won the Stanley Cup very casually, whether it be the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have been a dominant regular season team for so long, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Boston Bruins. You have those four teams that are expecting to make the playoffs going into this season, and you're adding to that a young Ottawa Senators team, a young Detroit Red Wings team, a young Buffalo Sabres team, and a young Montreal Canadiens team as well to the equation of these are all teams that could maybe push for a wild card spot if everything goes to plan and things fall right for them. But there are definitely going to be teams in the Atlantic that perhaps deserve to make the playoffs but miss out. So very curious to see what lies ahead here for the Buffalo Sabres. I'm very excited to see the brand of hockey they're going to be playing under Lindy Ruff. And overall, I think that this is a team that's going in the right direction. They're adding a lot of talent into their cupboards. And yeah, they've been, I think, building a really intriguing team that has a lot of balance. Perhaps a bit more diversity could be used in terms of the mold of prospects that they've been investing in, especially among forwards. But overall, a really well-constructed team that I think will see a decent amount of success in the coming seasons. But that wraps things up here for us at Locked On NHL Prospects. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, head on over to Locked On Sports Today, a 24-hour news show that gets you all the information about the sporting world that you could possibly want to have access to. If you're watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you think about this series, about this episode specifically, what type of content you'd like to see from us moving forward, or any other thoughts or questions that you may have. We're always happy to read your comments. So that wraps things up. My name is Sebastian High from Dobber Prospects, and typically joined by Hadi Kalakesh, the Director of North American Scouting at Dobber Prospects as well. But thank you so much for listening today, and we hope that you tune back in very shortly.